Hi, so 16th of January 2026, and I have a little mini success because I have finally published the first article on Substack, starting my series on psychiatry and eugenics, part 1, Introduction and the Pareto Principle, which I will explain shortly what I mean by Pareto Principle and why I am discussing the Pareto Principle at the beginning. But firstly, the way I'm going to do it is I've written the article, and here it is, and I'm just going to use it for this post. But the idea is I write the article and also make a TikTok post on the same day and put both out, so that if TikTok withdraws my post or takes it down, especially when it's going to start, discussing some really nitty-gritty events or individuals that the algorithms do not like very much, the likelihood is the post will be censored and taken down, because we know this has happened already. Hence why I'm doing Substack, as recommended by many of you. So either way, if the post gets taken down, you can read the article on Substack. And ideally, you can just subscribe to Substack. It's free. I'm not putting any paywall on it. If you want to donate and you like the articles, you're more than welcome. But the idea is I want everybody to have the knowledge. So you can subscribe. And when I put an article on that topic, then you will receive the email. The way I'm going to do it is in parts. So part 1, part 2, part 3. And hopefully by the end of the year, I might have covered the 200, 300, 400 years on the topic. I'm not sure, because it's very, very extensive. And what I will do is I will start literally like at the beginning. Well, I mean, within reason, and just really go up, like year by year or decade by decade with, all the individuals involved in that, along the same line as psychiatry, because they are very, very intertwined. So there'll be a balance of what's going on with the whole eugenics line and psychiatry, because they literally meet up at many points and they basically merge completely. Right. So that's the plan. That's the plan. So do subscribe, as it will get, as I said, a bit very detailed, let's just say. And I've had my experience with having my post taken down. Good. So what's eugenics? Let's start with eugenics first, right? Right here. I know what eugenics is. So I want to give you the right date. So it was coined. So the word was coined in 1883 by Sir Francis Galton, a British bloke. Now, that man happened to be a half-cousin of Charles Darwin, and he was also a pupil of Wilhelm Wundt. Now, if you've watched my post on that subject of a few months ago, Wilhelm Wundt is the man who declared that the human soul didn't exist and it was all in the brain, and he was the father of modern psychology. So right there, we already have an issue. However, Galton comes on a little bit later. He makes up the word eugenics, but there are quite a number of incidents and people before him, and that's why we're going to start earlier. But now, Pareto Principle. Why am I talking about the Pareto Principle? So the Pareto Principle, some of you will know it as the 80-20 rule. And it was actually it's a general rule. It's not a mathematical law. And it was based on observations by the Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto in 1896, where he observed that 80% of land in Italy was owned by 20% of the population. And then he went on to notice, even in his own garden, how 80% of the production of peas was made by only 20% of the pea pods. So that was just an observation. And through the decades that followed in 1900, that principle was used more and more in businesses and engineering. And it is a general rule that works. For example, you may have like 80% of customer complaints tend to be just from 20% of customers. 80% of healthcare expenses tend to be from maybe 20% of the patients. And it's a sort of a general ratio. I mean, as simple as that. But the way I've been using it is slightly differently, and I've used it based upon coming across something really interesting quite a number of years ago. I came across a book by John Ronson called The Men Who Stare at Goats. And a film was made of this, and it's to do with the USA's effort in psychic warfare or something like that in various experiments. It's true. I mean, it did happen. It's probably far worse than what's in the book, but anyway, we'll leave it at that. So what happened is, in that book, the author refers to a US Army historian, SLA Marshall, who after World War II did a lot of research and wrote a book called Men Against Fire, The Problem of Battle Command. And the author Marshall asserted that in World War II, no more than 15% to 25% of American combat infantrymen actually fired their weapons at an exposed enemy soldier with the intent to kill. And that always really stuck to me. It stuck in my mind because I have a particular interest in ancient warfare, usually 200-300 before Christ, such as the Punic Wars, Alexander the Great, and that whole area. And I was really curious about this, and I kind of came to the conclusion that it was very much a sort of similar distribution to the Pareto principle. And when I started to really look and observe more and more around me, it became very clear that it's actually quite a very valid observation, because I believe, this is my own opinion now, I really believe that this is true, because the author said he attributed this to an innate human aversion to killing a fellow human being, a resistance so strong that soldiers might die before they could overcome it. And to me, that meant that, you have 5 soldiers, and out of those 5 soldiers, obviously it's a percentage, but one may be willing to, target the gun and with the intent to kill, and 4 others just simply couldn't quite do it. And I've read more about it. Like apparently they kind of, place the gun in such a way that it doesn't quite hit the person and that sort of thing. Now, I have worked in defense for quite some years, and I've spoken to many military people, and I came to the same conclusion. People that were in theater in Afghanistan and Iraq and other places. So it's very interesting, and I believe very much that this is a truth, that 80% of the population on this earth, on this planet, are well-intentioned towards their fellow human beings and haven't got that intent to wipe them out. However, you have that 20%, who is totally willing to inflict torment, to inflict pain, to, totally do in their fellow human beings. And psychiatry, the likes of psychiatry, eugenicists, those sort of people, in my opinion, come in that category. Same for mainstream media. Because it takes a certain kind of person to continuously work on a daily basis to keep their fellow human beings in a state of stress, worry, fear, anxiety, jitters. The average person just doesn't do that. But there are some people who get a great kick out or joy out of keeping their fellow human beings down or degrading them and, all that kind of things. Now, historically, obviously through history, there's always been people like that, isn't it? I mean, take the Spanish Inquisition, the French Revolution, goes back thousands of years, really doesn't matter. The witch hunts of Europe. I mean, that was quite something. So it doesn't matter which country, it doesn't matter what sex, what race, what color, what creed. In every walks of human existence, in every human endeavor, you will have that percentage. I believe you will have that percentage of this Pareto principle, of that small, 20% that will cause most of the problems for everybody else. And that 20% who is totally willing to do in their fellow human beings, for whatever reason. They just will not tolerate them doing well or winning or succeeding, whatever the reason. Perhaps they're afraid that they're going to be better than them. I don't know. But the point is, I have done all that research with that viewpoint. And I was asked actually by someone on one of the comments. I was said, how do you look at all that and don't feel stressed? And when I thought about it, I said that is why. And I answered them. I said, the reason is I totally have total faith in my fellow human beings. And I'm aware that when I look at all that, I'm looking at a tiny proportion of people who are making a hell of mischief for the rest of the world. I mean, mischief is a light word, isn't it? But that's really what's happening. And so I have total faith in my fellow human beings. And I totally recognize that there are 20% who will have no qualms about doing me in or doing other people in. But when you look at it from that point of view, you feel a lot calmer because you realize that it's not everybody. You know, the mainstream media and those sort of people want to make you feel like it's everybody, which is bad. And it's not true. I mean, the other day I had a comment, I had to block a person. Somebody came along and left a comment on all my post saying, I'm not joking, it says, why do all white people always lie? I was like, wow, okay, that is so random. But that's a great example of a total generality and total effort just to go and upset people. I mean, it didn't upset me. I was like, okay, that's brilliant. That's a fantastic generality. No critical thinking at all. So I just blocked them and deleted the comments. But that's the kind of thing. So the way to look at it, the reason I look at it that way is because when you're looking at eugenics and psychiatry and the people behind it, the puppet masters, you know, you can look at the Rockefellers, the Hitlers and all that, but those guys are well later in the story. Obviously, they're very big and important recently, but they're later. They were like a lot of other people before. But when you recognize that, you can look at it and recognize that it is that small percentage of people. And it isn't everybody. So it actually makes one feel a lot calmer. Well, it certainly makes me feel a lot calmer that I can look at it because some of the stuff is grim. It's just horrible. That what those people could do to their fellow human beings is just, it's inconceivable. The average person cannot conceive of it because the average decent person couldn't do that. And that's the point, you see. So the first person I will talk about in the next post on that subject. So on part 2, we're going to start date order, but it's around 1700s, in the 1700s. I will do the psychiatry along it because that started a little bit before, but we've got to start somewhere. So we're going to start with like one of the first person who started the whole ball rolling, and it is Thomas Malthus. And many of you will have heard of Thomas Malthus, when you've heard the word Malthusian. And we're going to talk about his essay on the principle of population. And we're just going to take it step by step, part by part, date order, names, people, their books, their writing. I have a lot of the books. Not all of them, but I have quite a lot of it. Some of them on Internet Archive. Some of them I don't really want to spend the money because they're so horrible. Do I really want those on my shelf? But we're just going to keep at it, step by step, dateline, you know, and just come up all the way to present time in 2025 and discover what psychiatry, well, you know already because I've done loads of posts, but see the extent of the psychiatry and the eugenics that's taking place right now as of 2025.